I'm no expert on timing, but even I know Michigan's got to get a move on.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for helping make that the case. More depth on the Rose Bowl, more breakdown. That's what you wanted. That's what you're getting later on today's show, and the Auburn chaos. Oh, boy. Oh boy, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars is here, and we're talking about Michigan. Why? Why would that? Oh, yes, that's right, because Kyle Whittingham would like to hire Jay Hill. But as we record this segment, Jake, that hasn't happened yet. And look, I'm not a coach, but I believe the portal opens Friday, and I would think, I'm venturing a guess, that Kyle Whittingham would like to have, coordinators when the portal opens on Friday. So do you think Jay Hill will be one of those guys?
Yeah, I do believe that he will be the defensive coordinator for Kyle Whittingham. I think the timeline for this, Spencer, I think he's been trying to be very careful about not spoiling the bowl games for both Michigan and Utah, which are being played on New Year's Eve. And I think as soon as those games go final, I think a lot of these pieces, and speaking of guys like Jay Hill, et cetera, obviously at Utah, a guy like Jason Beck, who looked like they're the odds-on favorites to be the offensive and defensive coordinators at Michigan. I think the things will move very quickly once these games go final.
Does that strike you as odd that they're taking that into account potentially? I mean, maybe it's giving the schools an opportunity to try and keep them around, but we're talking about the Michigan's in, I don't even remember which bowl game. I know Utah's in the Vegas Bowl on New Year's Eve, but does that feel weird to you? It feels a little bit odd to me because a bunch of other players and coaches have said, Lane Kiffin left a playoff game to go be the head coach at LSU, but you're telling me that Jay Hill's saying, well, we want to wait until Michigan plays their bowl game.
I don't necessarily think it's on Jay Hill's side. I just believe it might be Kyle Whittingham trying to kind of make one announcement and at least having the vast majority of the guys, because he made it very clear in his introductory press conference, Spencer, he's got an idea of what his staff is going to be. And like I said, I fully believe that Jay Hill is going to be part of that. I think he may be just looking at it from the perspective of he wants to make just one announcement and move forward with that. Now, to your point, it could be that, yes, BYU is trying to retain Jay Hill. And in the case of Utah, Jason Beck is getting the overtures to stay put in Salt Lake City. And I would wholeheartedly believe that both of those programs are and should be trying to do that. But I do think that we're going to have an announcement pretty quickly in the back half of this week.
Do you think there's any chance that either of these programs, you're very close to both up there in the Salt Lake area? Obviously, you got a radio show in that part of the Beehive State. Do you think there is any chance that Jason Beck could be lured to stay with Morgan Scalley at Utah after spending just 1 year with the Utes, or that Jay Hill would decide, no, I'm sticking with Kalani Sitake?
Yeah, I do believe there would be a pull for both of them to stay put. I think more so in the case of a guy like Jay Hill, crazily enough, because if you look at his coaching record, he coached at Utah, he coached at Weber State, and he's coached at BYU. And by the way, this is a guy who grew up in the state of Utah, played high school football here. So I think the pull of staying home, quite literally, might be a reason why he would consider it. Jason Beck obviously played college football here for BYU, and his wife is a BYU alum as well. So I do think there's a pull to the Beehive State for them. So I do think that there could be some scenario where those two stick around, but at the same time, the allure, the pull of representing Michigan and having the doors that would open to you recruiting-wise and potentially down the line in terms of head coaching opportunities. If you go to Michigan, I think that ultimately wins out in the end for both of them.
Yeah, the money, the caliber of recruits you can bring in there. Certainly BYU has shown, and I think Utah to a slightly lesser but still reasonably solid extent, you can recruit well at both of those places. The amount of high school talent in the state of Utah is doing nothing but growing every single year, it seems. But it's Michigan, right? It's Michigan. And by the way, I don't think there would be any animosity between Kyle Whittingham and Jay Hill after they've coached against each other for the last couple seasons. They've known each other for a very long time. You've covered Jay Hill a lot in his career. How do you think his defensive philosophy would translate to Michigan?
I think it'll fit just fine because it's very much a defense that's predicated upon stopping the run first and foremost. And we all know that the Big Ten, the whole brand identity of the conference, it feels like, is they are downhill smash mouth teams. Now, that's changed a little bit in this day and age of college football, but still, programs like an Ohio State, like a Penn State, some of the top dogs in that league, they want to run the ball on you, and that's what this defense is designed to slow down. And the nice part is both Kyle Whittingham and Jay Hill come from the same coaching tree, speaking of the defensive identity that they boast. So I think it would work very, very well in Ann Arbor.
Now for perhaps the more uncomfortable question in this segment. Should Jay Hill decide to be Michigan's defensive coordinator, would he bring any BYU players with him?
Players, I do think there could be some players that are in play. I think sophomore standout safety Falatau Satuala, for example, would be a guy because he's been very quick during his time at BYU to say that a big reason why he picked BYU over Utah was because of Jay Hill. So I think guys like that may be inclined to maybe hit the portal and look at their options and ultimately land at Michigan. But I also think at the same time, BYU as a school, speaking of just the program, speaking of the football program, is very much you go there to represent more than just BYU by and large. You represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, stands for just a little bit more. So it seems like BYU, I use the term a lot, might be a little more portal proof than a lot of programs out there.
Speaking of talent acquisition, did you see the report from Rivals that dropped earlier? Apparently, schools might circle back on Ryder Lyons, who is currently the crown jewel recruit of the 2026 class for BYU. The schools that they hinted at in the social media posts: Michigan, Oregon, who was going after him very hard, and Kentucky, where current Oregon OC Will Stein is going to be the head coach, thus has a relationship with him. Any concern at all that Ryder Lyons could flip away from BYU amidst all this?
There's always going to be that concern, Spencer, to be honest. And I think BYU expected that as well, because here's the deal about missions for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When you go out on a mission, you essentially become a free agent once again, once you pass a certain threshold in terms of the time out in the mission field. And you actually have to re-sign, speaking of the NCAA, when you return from your mission with the program that you go to. So, yeah, I wouldn't expect anything less than for those programs to continue to kind of be like, hey, Ryder, you still, you good with BYU? And I fully expect that will continue throughout the duration of his mission service. But I also think at the same time, BYU with his family connections, the fact that they have the NIL prowess that they have, and the opportunity to potentially succeed a guy like Bear Bachmeier in pretty quick succession once he enrolls at BYU, I think those are the ultimate pulls that keep him in Provo.
Closing this on Michigan, I can't imagine that coordinator hires are announced any later than Thursday night, right? Like, I just can't. It opens on Friday, which is weird, by the way. Why does it open on a Friday? You want everybody. It's already a 24/7, 365 job enough for coaches. You just say, oh, by the way, got to work the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, forget about that. Ringing in the new year with family? No, you're not.
Well, that's the thing about it is it's a 10-day window, but really a lot of the action comes in the first 24 to 48 hours. So to your point, yeah, I do think that if they have the coordinators locked down in terms of agreements, I would imagine you have an announcement very, very quickly, and you want to get those in place because, as you said, you want, if you're Kyle Whittingham, to be able to go out and talk to portal guys and say, hey, this is my offensive and defensive coordinator. Here's our philosophy, because that's a big selling point. When there's the unknown, that obviously hurts your chance of landing a guy like that.
Jake Hatch, Locked On BYU, one of the best in the business. Alabama in the rain will not be one of the best of the business. How big of a factor does that play? That's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. And Do you think FanDuel's limited to the NBA? No, what a silly take that'd be. That'd be worse than my best bets, which have, of course, come from the lines provided by FanDuel. They've got college football. Got you covered for the college football playoff, the quarterfinal, the semifinal, the national championship. Everything that you want college football betting related is, of course, there at FanDuel. Point spread, point total, money line, it's all there. FanDuel has you covered. And as I mentioned, they've got the NBA too. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. How big of a factor is the weather going to be? Not something I ever thought we'd say about Southern California, but here we are. Jimmy Stein of Locked On Alabama is here to talk about the Rose Bowl. And if it's a downpour, and look, I was in Southern California over the holidays, Jimmy. We're not talking about a light sprinkle that Southern Californians are just being soft about and over-exaggerating and such. This has been some real serious rain, and for a team that has not run the football all season long, boy, on paper, just my instant reaction is if it's coming down hard, that favors Indiana in a big way. What do you think?
I think that's an extremely fair take. I don't think there's any Alabama analyst in the world that will tell you that Alabama's run the ball well. Running the ball has been really a disaster for Alabama in 2025, particularly if you look at Alabama's history. DeBoer and Ryan Grubb don't particularly run the ball first. It's never been a huge part of their offensive philosophy, a run-first philosophy. But Alabama's run the ball so poorly in 2025. It's been a huge story to me, Spencer. It's sort of the priority of the offseason. Alabama's not going to fix this before Thursday, and they're certainly not going to fix it in the rain. However, I think you could also make the point that rain can be an equalizer. And by that, I mean who slips, who falls, who drops the football. Those are things that the rain can change. And who knows, I think when it rains hard and it's a bit of a slop fest, anything can happen. But does Indiana run the ball better than Alabama? There's no question. That's true.
Yeah, and I like that point you raised about it being the equalizer. And strange though it is, as I've mentioned several times, Indiana is favored by almost a touchdown. And I think that is correct because Indiana's a more complete football team. They have played better all season long. They haven't lost a single game yet. We'll see if Alabama can change that. I think they're capable. The interesting thing to me about this matchup, Jimmy, is that the similarity between these two teams, especially if it is raining really hard, gets even more interesting. And the biggest similarity and strength for both of these programs is situational football. You think about the way that Alabama's gotten to this point. 4th and 2 against Auburn. 3rd and 4th down. They weren't great on 3rd down against Oklahoma, but a 4th down conversion resulted in a touchdown against Oklahoma. You think about Indiana. They only scored 13 points in the Big Ten championship game. Why'd they beat Ohio State? They got a couple of stops, including a 4th down when Ohio State was in the red zone. And on 3rd down and a situation where Ohio State had to have it, Fernando Mendoza makes the play. Both of these staffs over the last couple of years, and both of these quarterbacks have been exquisitely good in situational football when their best is required. Is that how you see this matchup as well?
I do. If it's tight in the fourth quarter, both teams are going to be comfortable. Alabama has won a lot of tight games in the fourth quarter against good teams. Indiana clearly has. There's a 0 on the right side of the win-loss column. They're comfortable in close games. Keep in mind that as good as Indiana has been, there have been tight games. They beat Penn State by 3. They beat Iowa by 5. They beat Ohio State by 3. They beat Oregon by 10. Alabama has more in common with those teams than they do with the Purdue's and Northwesterns and that non-conference schedule that they played. I think every indication in the world is this is going to be a tight game in the fourth quarter. Both teams, both coaching staffs are comfortable in that situation, but there's only going to be one winner.
Give me an X factor for Alabama in this game. It could be a position group, a player, a stat that people are not really thinking about that you look at and go, boy, if this guy steps up, if that group plays well, if they flip this stat on its head, where do you go?
Jam Miller, I know this sounds crazy because Alabama's not run the ball well, and I'm not about to tell you guys that Alabama is going to run the ball well. But in games that Jam Miller has been healthy, Alabama's averaged 125 yards a game on the ground. That doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot. But if Alabama rushes for 120 or 125 yards and Ty Simpson has his average game, which is 250 yards in the air, thus that's 375 yards of offense for Alabama, they're not turning over the ball. They can easily win the game. I think getting to 120 in the ground game, it's a lot to ask against what's clearly a very good Indiana defense against the run. But when Jam Miller has been healthy, and in conjunction with Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley, that's another back that was a prominent player in Alabama's running back rotation early. He's been lost lately. He's back. If Alabama cobbles together 120 yards, this is going to be more of a balanced offense and something that's more difficult for Indiana to stop. I look at that number as sort of a cutoff number. If Alabama rushes for 120 with those backs, I like their chances.
I think 120 would be great for Alabama against this Indiana defense, because against the Hoosiers, who probably have the Broyles Award winner at DC and Bryant Haynes, you can't go into every single third and longer than two with Indiana knowing you have to throw. Like there has to be 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, a couple of times they've got to be able to run the ball for the first down. Otherwise, I just think you are going to rely so heavily on those money downs and Ty Simpson. And the next thing I want to talk about, the Alabama offensive line. Mm-hmm. I feel like they have some high highs and then they have some low lows. And Indiana, in their best win of the year prior to Ohio State, it was at Oregon. And that's a game where Oregon, who has a great offensive line, they were one of the 3 finalists for the Joe Moore Award this year. What they struggled with in that game was, yes, Indiana's physicality, and of course they've got a notable injury up front, which helps Alabama, but they did such a good job of blitzing and confusing Oregon's protection schemes and getting free runners at the quarterback. I've seen Alabama struggle with those things this season as well. I think if I were going straight line keys to the game, Alabama's got to keep Ty Simpson upright.
Sure. And those sack yards have a lot to do with the rushing. I mean, for instance, like I said, 120 would be great. You know, Ohio State only rushed for like 50, 60 yards. Oregon's also in that 60, 70-yard range. Why is that? The sacks. You know, Bo Jackson for Ohio State rushed for, I think, nearly 90 yards against Indiana. Jordan Davidson for Oregon, he had almost 8 yards a carry. The backup running back almost 6 yards a carry. But they didn't rush for very many yards over the course of the game because Indiana's defense sacked Sand 5 times. They sacked Dante Moore 6 times. You take away all that sack yardage, really affects the rush yardage numbers. But the tailback numbers weren't terrible against Indiana. That's what Alabama has to avoid. Once you get sacked by Indiana 5-6 times a game and you're behind the chains to that extent, if it's 3rd and 12, 3rd and 17, Alabama's not be converting any of those third downs. You got to stay ahead of the chains by having positive rushing yards and not give up those sacks. I would say, Spencer, in those fairly tight games, they're 20-20 with Oregon late in the game. Ohio State's 13-10. Those sacks by Indiana may have been the reason that Indiana won both of those games. It's imperative that Alabama keeps Ty upright, keeps that pressure off of him. It's a big ask, but Alabama's offensive line is probably healthier than it's been at any point since early October.
Yeah, in that Oregon game, it was quarterback pressure and disruption up front that led to a deflected ball and what really wound up being the game-clinching interception. Because Oregon was driving for the tie at home, about 5-6 minutes to go in the football game, and Indiana comes up with a pick on the second play from scrimmage on Oregon's offensive drive. So let's move into the game prediction area here. I do think Indiana wins, whether it's raining or shining. I think that Indiana's just got more advantages. I trust them, even though they're not entirely healthy along that defensive line. They are healthy along the offensive line. I trust Fernando Mendoza. I trust Curt Cignetti in this spot, and I don't think that there are going to be a lot of points. If the weather keeps rolling through, the over-under, according to our friends at FanDuel, Jimmy, is 47.5, which is crazy when you have a battle of first-round quarterback talents and you're throwing out that, I think they're aware of how well both defenses are playing right now. Alabama's defense was, of course, great against Oklahoma after a sluggish start. Indiana's has been great all season long. Could get a lot of rain. I think that Indiana's got enough to get this done. I don't think it's crazy to think Alabama wins, but I'm going with Indiana. I do think Alabama covers the 7.5, which as we tape this segment is where the line is at. If you can get that over a touchdown, I think that's a pretty solid value from a betting standpoint. And I mean, my best bets have been so good this year. You should take my my advice on that front. But I'll take Indiana to win a close, really kind of ugly game in the rain. 17-13. I mean, just
wow.
God,
wow. Well under.
Feels gross to say that out loud, but that's
well under that low. Well under that.
Well under the low total. I like the defenses in this one. How about you?
I certainly like the defenses in this. These are two of the best 10 defenses in college football. I really believe that. And both teams will have a difficult time running the ball against the other. Both teams will have a difficult time driving the length of the field and scoring against the other. That's for both. I think this is going to be tight in the fourth quarter. I can see much like Indiana, Oregon, 20-20 late in the game, and a touchdown decides it late. I'm going to pick Alabama to win 27-21. So remember this. A lot of the statistical profile in this game favors Indiana. I agree with that completely. If you look at the statistical profile, it's Indiana. But Indiana's fourth best win, Illinois, Penn State. Alabama's played Georgia and Oklahoma 4 times. Alabama's statistical profile was created against what ESPN says is the 4th or 5th strongest schedule in the country. Alabama's healthier at any point since late September when they beat Georgia and Athens. This is the Alabama team that Indiana's going to see, not the Alabama team in Atlanta against Georgia, not even the Alabama team against Oklahoma a couple of times. This is the healthiest Alabama has been. That healthy Alabama team finds a way to score late and wins 27-21.
Solid split here on the picks. Jimmy Stein, Locked On Alabama, great as always. Speaking of the great state of Alabama, more chaos at Auburn because, why not? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever, but actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating with long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I've used Game Time to go to a college football game, college basketball game, another college football game, another college basketball game, a comedy show, another comedy show, and the experience was great. I saved money compared to other ticketing services. I know because I checked. I knew exactly what to expect. The total had all-inclusive prices up front. The view from my seat was exactly what the app showed me. Game Time's just got everything you want. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. It's a rough start for the Alex Golesh era. It will get better. It will absolutely get better. Deuce Knight is in the transfer portal, a guy that has been billed, or was, I should say, since he's going to transfer starting on Friday, as the future of Auburn football, a quarterback who showed immense potential, was a super highly rated recruit coming out of high school. He's going into the portal. Cam Coleman is going into the portal. Do you realize among the top players on the 24/7 transfer portal rankings, Auburn's got the top 2 at 2 different positions? Because Xavier Chaplin, their offensive tackle, 6'7", 348 pounds, started all 12 games this year, is the number 2 offensive tackle available, trailing only Carius Kern from LSU. So Cam Coleman has been talked about on this show, many others, discussed many times about where he could potentially end up. And I think that his loss is significantly bigger than Deuce Knight because quarterback relationships and dynamics, it's different. But Coleman's a guy that One day we might look back and go, yeah, that was a sign that Alex Golesh wasn't the right fit at Auburn for whatever reason. I'm not saying that's the case now. Just stash that thought away in the back of your mind, and then let's revisit it in 3 years' time if Auburn, again, fires a coach before he gets to his 4th season. So if you look at what Cam Coleman is capable of being versus what he's been, dude could be one of the biggest breakout players in all of college football. His stats aren't going to blow you away. He's never had a 1,000-yard season. Now, I've seen plenty of articles written about where he could wind up going and teams that would potentially be a fit. The only positive outcome, aside from actually getting him to come back to Auburn, which is possible, but I don't think very likely, the only positive outcome Auburn can get now is that he doesn't go to Alabama. But I got to tell you, it would certainly fit. The offense that Alabama runs under Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb is any wide receiver's dream. Because not only, as we just talked about, are they not capable of running the football very well, they don't even really want to. They just say, we'll drop back with an NFL quarterback and we'll have him throw 30 to 40 times a game and we'll throw plenty of 50-50 balls down the field and trust our wide receivers to go make a play. It would be a great pickup for Alabama. You'd stick it to your rival and it'd be a great fit in the offense. I think everything about that would make perfect sense. That's one school that's been suggested. Another one is Texas A&M. So Texas A&M is where Cam Coleman was committed when Jimbo Fisher was the head coach before he flipped to Auburn. He spent 5 months as a Texas A&M commit. Maybe College Station is a place that interests him. It's a lot of SEC schools that are potentially in the fold here. Here's another one, and I'm just going to sit here and tell you that it'd be crazy. It is crazy to think about, but also, I don't know. Is it really that wild? I saw a piece that I think was more speculating than implying actual contact has been made. And they're, of course, losing their premier recruiter at this position. What if Cam Coleman went to Ohio State? Yeah, that scares you, doesn't it? Because Julian's saying, pretty sure he's back next year. Jeremiah Smith still has to play another year of college football. Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? Ohio State has had some unbelievable tandems over the year at wide receiver. If Ryan Day really wants to go for it, and maybe the outcome of the game that's being played the day that this show airs, Wednesday, of course, Ohio State and Miami in their college football playoff quarterfinal. Maybe the outcome would determine the veracity with which Ryan Day would go out and make this move. Because if they're upset by Miami, well, all of a sudden, the pressure would ratchet up significantly on Ryan Day, and Ohio State would start to face all these sorts of questions again. When are they going to win another national championship? I mean, that's not Miami wasn't that good of a team. I think they're much better than Miami. I've said before, I think they're going to win the game and cover the 9.5 points, which is what FanDuel has the line at as I record this show. So if that doesn't happen and Miami pulls it off again, winning a game in which they're an underdog, hey, maybe Ohio State would go. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm playing that up too much. But if Ohio State were to suddenly have that emotional swift kick in the rear of, hey, you got to get going and utilize this unicorn that you have on the other side, what would you do? How do you defend Ohio State if Cam Coleman's on one side and Jeremiah Smith is on the other? I don't know. I don't know that there's a secondary to all of college football that can match up with those two guys. I think you just double cover both of them and then trust everybody else to try to make plays, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. So I saw that get suggested and went, man, that'd be pretty wild. LSU has been thrown out there as well. Lane Kiffin has been dubbed the Portal King before. I'm not ruling it out. Not going to rule it out. Here's the thing, though. And this is the other thing I want to bring up in this particular segment. So Cam Coleman is pretty clearly the most coveted transfer portal wide receiver. The depth of talent at that particular position group, whichever team you were a fan of, whichever coach you think is going to crush the portal, the number of quality wide receivers that are going to find a new team via the portal this year is as crazy as I've seen it before. Nick Marsh, according to 24/7, guy I've talked about before on the show, is their 5th highest rated transfer receiver. You've got Amarion Miller from Colorado. You have got DeAndre Moore Jr. from Texas. Eugene Wilson III from Florida, just to name a few. That position group is going to see some big names float around. The quarterbacks are abundant. You got Brendan Sorsby. There was a report from someone that covers Texas that I saw that Brendan Sorsby might be going to LSU. Let's keep tabs on that, because Brendan Sorsby, last I heard, was going to Texas Tech. I don't know, but maybe that report was just trying to throw a jab at Texas Tech. I don't know. But Brendan Sorsby, according to 24/7, top quarterback available in the portal. Now, he would not be my number one guy in the transfer portal. He would be one of the top guys for sure, but I am a Josh Hoover stan. So Josh Hoover, I think, is criminally underrated by the transfer portal rankings right now, and he'd be my number one quarterback should he go into the portal. But I think that what you can get at wide receiver in this cycle, and with what you can get at quarterback, offenses are going to be quickly elevated or just outright revolutionized, even more than they were last year. And look, what Texas A&M did in the transfer portal at wide receiver with Mario Craver and KC Concepcion, I think you can see a lot of teams have that sort of impact. Now, who's going to have the quarterback to throw to those particular guys, caliber Marcel Reed? Hey, we'll find out, depending on where these guys land. But I heard that, I read that thought about Cam Coleman and would he go to Ohio State, and I thought, I mean, it's wide receiver you. I'm a Seahawks fan. My guy Jackson Smith and Jigba is just one of, I don't know, a revolving door of mega talents they've had at that position. Cam Coleman is going to go somewhere and absolutely explode. And look, Ohio State might not be the perfect fit. He might want to go somewhere where he's truly the number one guy, not playing second fiddle to anybody, because he's had his talent fail to be maximized over his first 2 years of college football. Now, if he wants to do that, name I haven't seen suggested, Indiana. Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt are going to the NFL after this year. Cam Coleman at Indiana, when I tell you that's a 1-to-1 fit, that is 10 out of 10, 5 stars, no notes. So just some portal thoughts, which will open officially Friday. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.